All right. We should be live. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you're having a great start to your weekend, and that if you are a big football fan, that you're excited for the Super Bowl that's happening tomorrow. As always, it's a pleasure to have you guys here with us on the Shabbat day. As we know, this is a day of rest to spend it with the Heavenly Father, and obviously with friends and family that are resting with you. I'm going to give a couple moments for people to join the service and obviously start today's discussion. Let's copy this link that way. It's even easier for everyone to join. But yes, today's title is one that I took some time to write up because I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to name today's teaching. So after some discussion and generally thinking about it this morning, thinking about it a little bit before service started, I'm going to go with my fourth thought, as they say. Not my first, second, or third, but my fourth thought, which is the 5149 moment in our walk, which is a funky title, I understand. So I'll take a little bit of time to explain what exactly that entails. But that is today's title for the discussion. Yesterday, we had an excellent Bible study session with members of the congregation, and we had a great live talk on a couple topics. And Sister Elsa actually made a very beautiful breakthrough commentary point about how to engage with certain people in our lives, and not to obviously put no one on blast or anything like that. She gave a very good example of how she contends with her mother and certain things that she has to do to avoid conflict. And she explained it in a much better way than I can. So I wish she was here so she can break down her point. But she, all the same, gave a beautiful example of today's teaching, which is this moment, this, I'm going to call it 5149 moment. And I got this awesome quote that I want to share with you guys today. And the quote goes as follows. It's from a lady called Barbara Kingsolver, which is a great last name, by the way. And the quote goes as follows. Don't try to make life a mathematical problem with yourself in the center and everything coming out equal. When you're good, bad things can still happen. And if you're bad, you can still be lucky. Now, we know in the book of Proverbs, there's something similar to that in the sense of rain comes both on the righteous and the unrighteous, and the sun comes up again on the righteous and the wicked. So obviously Barbara's not too off from the beaten path here, but she brings up an excellent point. Oftentimes we have this walk and this life that we just feel like we can just have this perfect equation where if I do X, Y would happen. If I do B, A will happen. And 2 + 2 is 4. And I'm here to discuss that I don't believe that to be true. Nor do I believe it to be true in most cases. So let me take a step back. Just like life, our walk has moments that present themselves that are less than perfect. And I would say very unfair. Just like the quote I shared, the idea of 50-50, or let's say equal parts, in any given moment, I believe to be a fallacy. For most areas of our lives, I'm sure there exists an exception, because there's always an exception. But for the majority of things, I think 50-50 is a fallacy, is an idea. I believe in 9 out of 10 situations, you have someone or some group doing at least 51% of the work. Or someone or some group that's giving up something. They're sacrificing. So it makes it less than 50%. So in any given situation, you have this give and take. Where does this show itself the most? This 51-49 situation that I keep talking about, or at least I'm trying to start the discussion about. From my perspective, in relationships and in actionable items. So relationships, what I mean by that is husband, wife, parents, children, workspace / career, friendships. Those are the areas that I'm mostly speaking on, because all those areas, except for obviously your parents, because they chose for you to be born, but the other three areas you choose to be where you work, who you marry, and who you become friends with. And then in those dynamics, you have at the best case a 51-49, but in most cases you have one party that's here and one party that's here, or vice versa. And in some moments it comes closer to the medium, but they're never quite the medium. And in actionable items, what I mean by that is things that you do to improve situation, or things that you do that has a immediate or long-term effect on your situation. So I'm moving forward with something. That is what I'm calling an actionable item. Now, there's probably a better dictionary definition, but for today's discussion, that is the definition I'm giving, just so we have common grounds in this ongoing discussion. Make sure the stream is good here. Oh, Shabbat Shalom, my brother. I see you in the chat. So, in the world we live in now, like I said, we should count it as a blessing if we get situations where things are 51-49, because that means you have, in that situation, you have two motivated people or two motivated groups trying to get something done in an agreeable manner, because you have as close to 50-50 without being 50-50. So for these moments, these 51-49 moments, what can we do as believers? What can we do as individuals or families that are, or couples that are trying to live Torah in a world where Torah is not the societal standard? Because it's just not. Let's talk about that. So first, let's jump to the book of Proverbs, or Mishle, chapter 28, verse 8. My lovely wife is going to be reading for us today. Whenever you're ready, love.
He that by interest and unjust gain increases his substance, he shall gather it for others that will pity the poor.
So unjust gains is the point of this, and giving it to those who are not the poor. Well, giving it to those who are generous to the poor. But unjust gains, I'm pretty sure we can have a very long discussion here about how everyone hates when they get their paycheck, all the taxes they take out of it, all the fees, all the double and triple taxation we go through when we get our paycheck and we got to go to the grocery store and pay tax there. There's a lot of things that you can point to, unjust gains. Or, you make a nickel at work, your boss makes $1. Our life has a lot of moments like that. Our hope is in the revenue that we produce, that the labor goes to the poor. The end result goes to those that we count as needy, But in reality, the 51-49 situation is, many of us are in a situation where we're the good worker and we get paid the same as the bad worker. Or in some cases, we get paid less than the bad worker, though we work better. So where's the profit there? Also, there's moments where, let's move away from financial, in a household or shared living environment. One person does a certain amount of house chores, another person does an amount that's less than that. The hope is that, okay, we're all living here. We're trying to make a clean, healthy environment so that everyone can partake. But we all know there's always going to be one or two people in a household or a family that's going to do more of the chores than the people living there. Even though we're all living there, we're all obviously taking advantage of the space. But the hope is that the people who are doing more, the hope is that, okay, either the person is going to bring the charge and, take the lead on the situation so they don't always have to do more. Or they tell themselves, hey, I'm doing this for everybody else, the poor in the house that can't do it. But that is, I wanted to start here because unjust gain presents itself in more than just financial. And the poor is more than just financial. So I wanted to start here because I like the way Proverbs words this. The next place I want to jump to is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 17.
I said it in my heart. Elohim shall judge the Zadik and the wicked. For there is a time there for every purpose and for every work.
Yesterday, my brother Jordan shared this, and I said I had to put this in today's teaching. So for Brother Jordan, this is for you. But it's the part that I'm going to focus on is time. There is a time. How many of us here say all the time, I don't have time for something? I don't have time to do this. I don't have time for that gathering. I don't have time for that service. I don't have time for that date, that appointment, whatever the thing that comes that needs that resource that is time, we don't have it. Having being time. In this 51:49 moment, I'm sure if we have an honest discussion, many of us have people that make all the excuses in the world not to be somewhere. Going back to the relationships and actionable items case that I referred to. We all have a partner that does everything in their power to always be there, and a partner that tries to, but often doesn't. Or we have, if we're talking about a family, the parent that shows up for every kid event, and the other parent that can't always or doesn't because of X, Y, and Z reason, being time primarily. Or the friend that we love hanging out with when we get them, but keyword, when we get them, because they often don't have time. We have 24 hours in a day. And everyone sleeps different amounts, but I'll go with the average, which is the average adult in America sleeps a little under 7 hours a day. So let's just do 7 hours for easy math. If you work a standard 9 to 5, that's 8 hours. So that leaves you with about, give or take, about 9 hours every single day to do your personable things. Now, I'm not counting, eating, traveling to and from work, to do errands, chores. I'm not talking about all that. But I'm just saying you have about 9 hours every day. If you don't do anything on Shabbat, which understood, that means you have, give or take, 63 hours a week to make time for something. For a lot of us, we get comfortable or complacent in relationships where people always come to you, or people always do the thing for you. So you're the 51 or more, and the person doing all these things are the 49 or less. And this disbalance will increase as you get more and more comfortable, more and more complacent. And that will be judged as wicked, because that's an unfair situation. But before we even get to Yahuwah's judgment, we have to talk about the effect that has on the person or the group. Many times believers get caught up in this idea that because we believe there's this extended grace, we're not just heathens, we're believers. So you have to give me more rahamim. You have to give me more understanding. You have to contend with me more. And I agree to an extent that we have to exercise those principles more. Yes, because we're held to a higher standard. And we're called to be ambassadors. But to have the notion that I can now take advantage of someone's time or not show up to a place because this person is a believer is very, very, very ill-willed. And I believe it only gets worse when now we're talking about step away from the faith for a second. Partners. Just because she's your wife today and loves you doesn't mean she'll be your wife tomorrow and loves you. And the same can be said of your husband. We have a habit as people of once we have something, everything we did to get the thing is no longer done. My dad makes a really good analogy for this. When you were trying to get the girl, you smelled nice, dressed nice, got a haircut every week, took her out as much as possible. When you get the girl as a girlfriend, you still smell nice, get your hair cut every week, but you don't take her out as much because, you're already together. And then when you get married, you smell nice. And, when you have the time, you'll take her out because she's already married. So, you're not worried about losing her. So the time allocation goes put to something else. And though that's a super simplification of a very complex thing, it does speak to a truth. All those moments, all those interactions where the person needs more of your time and we don't give it, we have an imbalance. It's not 50-50. And how much of an imbalance it is how much is going to correct. And that's the scary part that we don't talk about. For a season or two, or for a moment or two, people can deal with drastic imbalances. As humans, we're very good at that. But eventually, that scale will rip. That scale will fail. And the repercussion of that, or I call it the snapback, is going to be 100% equal to all those moments of unequal situations. And a lot of people think that you can whisk that away with Rahamim and Yahuwah and the Bible. And no, you can't, because people are still going to people. And you can't you can't become less human through the walk. You become more in tune with what you are through the walk. And if you're on the fence about things, adding the word or adding a foundation based on the word only amplifies the point I'm making right now, which is now you're more cognizant of the 51 when you're the 51, or the 49 when you're the 49. But now you know what, or you should know what to do, and we're going to keep discussing. So in keeping discussion, let's go to the book of Luke, chapter 16, verse 10.
He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much.
We had a great discussion yesterday, like I mentioned, but the topic was lying. And I mentioned how yesterday's discussion had a little bit to do with today's teaching. So for those who were curious what I was talking about, this is the verse I was referring to in the connection. We know, or better said, we should know, and using the correct pronouns, I should know what I need to do and every dynamic I enter. So in being a husband, I'm a husband, a father, and a son, but I'm also a friend and a brother for many other people. But in my primary roles, father, husband, and son, I know what I need to do as my responsibility. be it in the small tasks or items I have to do for my wife, my parents, or my son, or in the big tasks I have to do for the same people I just mentioned. I know what is expected of me. So I try to be faithful to that. But there are days and moments where I cheat that. There are days and moments where I am being dishonest in both the little and in the most, because I'm not giving a 51%. I'm not giving the best every single time. So now my wife, my parents, my child has to tip the scale so to make up for my lack, or they're lacking, and now someone has to make up for the lack. So if it's not them, it's somebody else, and that applies in so many things, be it chores, finances, parenting, obviously, romantic gestures, intimacy, communication, making time. People notice when you care. People notice when you're giving an effort. People notice when you go out of your way for them. So they're more inclined to go out of their way for you. So when you're giving the more and they're the less, they notice. So the next time they give the more and you're the less, and then if you average that out, it kind of works out to 50-50. That's in a perfect situation. You don't want a situation where you're always the one giving the more, always putting in the effort, and you almost look like you're chasing. No one runs forever. Eventually you get tired. Even ultra marathon runners after 110 miles give up. So it's one of those things where we have to strike a very fine balance, of course. But in knowing our roles and our day-to-day lives, how are we treating the small things we have to do in this balance equation? And then how does that reflect into the big things? Without sounding like I'm projecting or sounding like I'm coming for anyone, many of us have bad moments that have forever tainted our lives. Many of us have built-in excuses that start in the little that cause a huge disparity in the lot. And I pray both through physical teshuvah of yourself or whatever the situation that caused the tainting, and obviously having a foundation and a social and interpersonal awareness of what you have to do and what is expected of you and what you should do for yourself, that things improve so that disparity is much, much less apparent. But I know that takes time. And I know that's not a decision you make once. That's a decision you make every day. And in the days that you don't make a decision, going back to the disparity, you acknowledge that you didn't do it that day, but that tomorrow you will do it if Yahuwah gives you that tomorrow to do it. That is a maturation process. That's an actionable thing that I mentioned earlier. But again, like I mentioned, just like relationships, actionable things are always in this constant 51-49. It's never 50-50. There is no such thing in most cases for this 50-50. Let's keep reading though. Let's go to Yaakov, or James, chapter 1. We're going to read verses 2 through 4.
My Israelite brothers, count it all simcha when you fall into diverse trials.
Diversity?
It just says there's no E. When you fall into diverse trials, knowing this, that the trying of your emunah, faith, produces patience, but let patience be a perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, wanting nothing.
Just like time, as we read in Ecclesiastes, and just like being faithful a little, Trials, faith, patience. They all have a relationship there. And we've had teachings on that, so you can go back to our YouTube page and check those archives. But I want to talk about patience. Patience is never 50-50. When you have a situation, and I'm gonna hone in on the relationship aspect. We all here have annoying husbands and wives. We all here have annoying parents, friends, brothers. We all here have people that patience has to be exercised from one party more than the other. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as we're equally patient with each other. Mm-hmm. And if you have that, please join our congregation. I need you. We have, again, to know who we are. If you are someone who's hot-headed or quick-tempered, you can't be with someone, or you can't roll aside someone that's going to trigger you all the time, or trigger you more times than not. Because though that will work your patience, every moment into that maturation of patience, one party is exercising patience to overcome your haughtiness. The hope always is that you learn to do better with every moment. That's the hope. But in getting there, you are in your trials and tribulations to get better, you are causing disparity every single day until you get to this point, which is the medium, and then over that point. So now you're carrying the load. But there is a period. And in that period, someone has to bear more patience with you. Now, talking about husband and wives or spouses, we have a weird generation mix going on. I don't want to say back in the day, because I wasn't there, and people tend to look at their past with tinted lenses. It's easy when all you see is outward appearances to say, oh, well, back in my day, my folks used to, never argue and never this and never that. Yes, because that's all you ever saw. But that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. With social media being as prevalent as it is, and I'm not going to bash social media because I make a living off it, so it's not all bad. But with social media being what it is, with everyone having a device in their pocket 24/7 that can record both visual and audio, communication being as easily accessible as any time in the history of man, we sure lack a lot of patience. We are so quick, and oftentimes too quick, to move on to the next thing. My wife makes the joke a lot of times that a lot of people, because of how the world is, they go through people like shorts, like story shorts on Instagram or on YouTube, which are only a couple of seconds. And I laugh only because I know people who they fulfill the serial monogamous role very well, where they won't say they never cheat, but they have 40 boyfriends. Or they are, I don't quite know what the appropriate term would be, so I apologize. But what I'm going to describe is this word. The person who says, I'm faithful, I love my partner, blah, 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 but they never take them out. They never do anything. They're always home, like they're like always, like, I don't know, like a hermit almost. Like, yeah, you're faithful because you don't do nothing. And oftentimes those people, because you never do anything, the love and the emotions that you have for the other person die, because you're just always doing the same thing, which is nothing. And I don't want to sound crude when I say this, but there's no amount of intimacy, there's no amount of sex or intercourse between people that can maintain that long term. Just like food, rice, as a Dominican, rice and beans is amazing. But if you told me all I'm going to eat is rice and beans now that I'm 28 till the day I die, I'm going to be a little peeved. And I'm pretty sure rice and beans would go from a delicacy to rice and beans. Many of us know someone who has that relationship I just described. And yeah, they're together. Yeah, they're not cheating. Yeah, they live together and the kids, blah, blah, blah. And then you hear later down the road when the kids go to finish high school or finish college, they divorce. Or, they moved to a different state, but one stayed. Like you hear a lot of these stories, and then you ask yourself, what happened? Nothing ever happened. Well, there you go. That was a disparity. Someone in that relationship was putting in a lot more work than the other person. That 49-51 situation. I always pray that men that get married love their wives more than their wives love them. That's always my prayer. Because I believe in a relationship, a man should love his wife more than his wife should love her man. And as a reward for that, I believe the wife will honor her man above every single person on the planet, including her parents and herself. That I believe that to be true. Because oftentimes, men are not looking for love. But I sure as hell am willing to put my hand on fire and say every man is looking for love, and to be loved and to be appreciated, which is just honoring. So we have all the tools today to do the things we need to do to reduce the gap. But unfortunately, those same tools are keeping us apart. Cheating is higher these days. Divorce are higher these days. Lack of communication are higher these days. Sexless marriages are higher these days. One kid households where we have two functional, healthy adults. It's more common these days. Intimacy lists or no intimate relationships are more common these days. Apologize. People not following faith. Doesn't matter if it's necessarily our walk or Christian or Muslim or Jew. People are not, they're faithful in the name, but not in the practice. All these moments of disparity are all these moments that I'm talking about. It's never 50-50. We're always giving or taking more in any given circumstance. So, to end the discussion, I want to read in the book of 1 Corinthians. I'm going to read the first 5 verses of chapter 6. I'm going to say we, that's the way.
How dare any of you, having a matter against another Israelite, go to court before the unsaved and not before a bet din of the Israelite Kedushim? Do you not know that the Israelite Kedushim shall judge the Olam Hazeh? And if you shall judge the entire Olam Hazeh, are you unworthy and unable to judge even the smallest matters? Don't you know that we shall judge the heavenly Malachim? How much more things that pertain to this Chaim? If then you have mishpatim to render in things pertaining to this Chaim, why then do you appoint as shoftim in the bet din those who are least esteemed in the Israelite congregation? I speak to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you to sit on the bet din? Is there not even one that shall be able to judge between Israelite brothers?
So this is 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Now, judging, giving righteous rulings, having the ability to do what you need to get done. We all know everyone's at different points in their walk. And again, I'm going to give credit or cite Sister Elsa again. So I apologize, Elsa. I'm saying too many times in the service. She said something yesterday that was hilarious. I apologize. Or at least hilarious to me. In one of our back and forth and amongst the discussion, she had made the point to say that it's just you talking to me when it comes to how people, I apologize, I have something in mind, how people speak to me and how they'll willfully lie to me to cover up something that they're doing to avoid looking bad in my presence or in my encounter with them, and that I should not take that as offensive. And I had laughed, and I was sharing with my wife after the discussion that that's such a silly thing to me, and she has made this remark before, and some other personal people in my life. And it's funny because this was part of my notes for today's teaching and how those moments come up. Why is it funny? You've heard people say, or you've probably been told, depending on how faithful you guys have been in this walk, you're the religious person. So people act a certain way. So the dynamic in that circumstance is they're going to pull away from you, and you're going to have to do a little bit more to explain why you do what you do, and what they're doing is not what they ought to be doing. Or you're going to have to care a little bit more so that you don't make that person feel bad for not doing the thing they ought to do, which is follow the word. But that's talking between no faith / little faith and you who are faithful. What about amongst the elect? And I call us the elect because we're taking time to do the things of Yahuwah. We're making it our goal to keep the word, keep the commandments, the ordinances, and the judgments, and the right rulings, and wear the appropriate attire, and proclaim the best around, the good news, making sure we assemble, doing all these things, loving our neighbor as ourselves, loving Yahuwah all our soul, might, and all that. We have this desire. So we're giving the 51 or more. But when you put a bunch of these people together, oftentimes you see people start pulling back. Oftentimes you start seeing what amongst the believers slack. And a little slack doesn't kill anybody, but a lot of slack puts strenuous circumstances on people because now they have to overcome in faith other people's slothfulness. And we can't have that if you want a long-term community that's connected. I didn't want today to be a long conversation because I have a question for those who watch. And I don't want to sound non-inclusive because anyone who watches this is always welcome to Hava Torah. Anyone who watches this or shares this is more than welcome to partake in the word of Yahuwah because the word is for everyone. Those who obviously choose to follow Yahusha, I welcome you. But we have to face the reality. And the reality is there's a reason why there was 5 million men, not counting women and children, but only one Moshe. There's a reason why that one Moshe had to, after getting counsel from Jethro, his father-in-law, delegate and makes ranks and files of men above the people. In Ahava and Torah, and I'm sure this is true in many congregations, because I've been to many congregations and I've sat with leadership and I'm friends with a lot of leadership. The biggest complaint among leadership, that people don't do enough. People don't show up. People are half-hearted in their attempts. Or they're good for a month or two, and then they suck for the rest of the year. And I use the word suckingly just because I don't have a better word, so I apologize. But in saying that, the ultimate 5149 is the walk. Starting with myself, because I'm a big believer in using the correct pronouns, I find myself having to put in more in this walk to cover up for my brothers. I'm not going to talk about the sisters because they're under the brothers. I hope that I have this feeling removed from me. And for those who watch this, if you're in the same boat as me, I can encourage you to have this hope that Yahuwah sees all things, good and bad, and he judges accordingly. And there's a season for everything. But for those who watch this and think it doesn't apply, I end this service with this question. Can you honestly say you're the person who gives more all the time? If the answer is yes, then I bid you Shabbat Shalom. You have passed this teaching / discussion with passing remarks. Hey, buddy. If the answer is no, I'm oftentimes the person who's getting the help or getting the additional because of my slack, I ask you why. And what are you doing to better that balance? Because how long are you going to stay in that position? That's my question to end the day. With that, I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for taking time to obviously watch today's service. If you have questions, comments, concerns, you can reach out to us on the YouTube chat. You can send an email. You can join us on WhatsApp. We're trying to grow the chat. We're trying to grow our following. I try to do as much as I can on these streams, but it's been hard now that I am a dad to make time. Excuses, I told me earlier. To have more brothers involved in the streaming. Right now, it's just me. If other guys want to step up and obviously teach, they're more than welcome to. But right now, it's just me. So I will do my best to give a service like this alongside our weekly studies and sessions that we do, which have been fantastic the last couple months. I hope that obviously this weekend you stay faithful to the word, you read your Bibles. This week was Parsha 46, which if you have not had a chance to read the word of Yahuwah, it's Deuteronomy chapters 27, 28, and the book of Colossians chapters 1 through 4. Take time to read to your wives. Take time to read to your children if you have them. Take time to talk about the beautiful things Yahushua has done for you and your family, to those that are near and dear to you. Take time and exercise patience with things that cause you issues. Make sure you are the better person more often than not, and make the extra effort. As a former basketball player, my coach was a big person of making the extra pass. Because sometimes what you think is a good shot, it's not a good shot. It's the next shot that's the better shot. Many of us have to practice that a lot more. If you're called to be a king, the number one job of a king is to serve the peasants. It's not the peasants to serve the king. If you're doing it right, at least. So, I love y'all. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Once again, Shabbat ends tomorrow morning, so please refrain from doing the things that would violate the rules of Shabbat. If you have any questions, I've already mentioned it in the chat, both on WhatsApp and here on YouTube. I hope you guys have an amazing day full of love, trust, and respectfulness. Shalom.